Hi, I'm Dr. Jane Levesque, and this is the Natural Fertility with Dr. Jane podcast, where we help couples uncover the real reasons behind their fertility struggles. And on today's episode, I want to give you a framework for supplements and fertility. When supplements actually make sense, what supplements make sense, when those supplements become a waste of your money, and then how to think about them so you're not chasing every shiny thing that you see that comes up on Instagram. Because here's the main thing I want you guys to take away from this podcast episode and what we're going to dive into deeper is that supplements are tools. They're not magic. So the right therapy for the right person at the right time is really powerful, but only after you've done some testing so you know what you actually need, your capacity to be able to absorb it. You're working with a practitioner that is providing you with the sequential treatment, so you're not doing something way ahead that your body's actually ready for. And then you have a plan to work on the basics, like the nutrition, the hydration, the stress management. Because here's the hamster wheel that I see all of you on, and I'd love to desperately get you off. The hamster wheel of taking supplements goes something like this. You see a supplement that an influencer or maybe even your friend or whoever recommended, and they said, this is the best prenatal, this is the best CoQ10, everybody should be taking NAC when they're trying to conceive, or a fish oil. So you buy a supplement, you try it, and you're like, yeah, I think I feel better. And then you just keep it for forever. And then you see another thing, and then you try it and you go, yeah, I think I feel better. And then you keep that. And then you see 2 or 3 more things, and you go, yeah, I think I feel better. And the next thing you know, you're taking those 10, 20 really expensive bottles, and you don't really know what's what. You're not sure why you're still not pregnant. You still have some of the symptoms. Something is feeling better, but you can't pinpoint it anymore. What I see in practice, by the time you come to us, you're either so fed up with supplements that you don't think they're going to work at all, or you're kind of in the opposite where you have 20, 30, 40, even 50 supplements. Like, some of our patients have sent us a list of everything that they're taking. It's so overwhelming just to look at the protocol for us. I can't imagine how overwhelmed the body is and why the person is so overwhelmed. And it's because there's no actual understanding of which supplement you need, what is the dosage, can your body even use them, is this the right time for the supplement, and is it doing anything for your fertility? So here's the 4 main mistakes that I'm seeing in practice right now by the time patients come to us, what most people think and do. The first thing is that they treat supplements as the main strategy instead of the support. So supplements are there to supplement your diet and lifestyle. They're not there to replace it. Sometimes we'll use supplements to help us, give us more energy, and to change up our microbiome and change up our mood so we can change our environment, but they will not replace diet and lifestyle. Okay, that's first thing that I want everyone to know. The second one is you assume that more is better, whether it's more products, whether it's higher doses, whether it's a more advanced therapy. So if it's an injection versus oral, if it's a patch, if I do everything stacked together, this is how I'm going to get the maximum results. More is not necessarily better. The third one is you follow research or influence recommendations with no context. And I see so many influencers who have never seen a patient, who are researchers but haven't seen patients in a really long time, who have unrealistic biohacking routines and environments where they dedicate their entire life to being a biohacker, where that doesn't apply to somebody who has a schedule and a job and very different demands. I see them, talking and creating supplements they have studies behind them, but the studies is usually done on tiny groups. Sometimes the timing is really unclear in terms of the menstrual cycle, because let's face it, this is very new. A lot of women haven't been studied because of their menstrual cycle, and now they're only being studied at a certain time of the cycle. There is no genetic information. There's no long-term follow-up. So following recommendations based on what worked for someone else is just, to me, it seems really silly if you think about it. Oh, when I took B12, I felt much better, so you should take B12, and that is the reason why you have low energy. But you can have low energy for like 100 different reasons. And so just oh, I took B12 and then I kind of felt better. And now I'm going to keep that B12 for forever because it gave me energy. But now my energy kind of goes away, but I'm afraid of stopping the B12 because that's the thing that gave me energy and I don't want to go into even lower energy. I speak on this because it's like even my mom was stuck in this cycle of listening to different sources, whether it was the internet or, the health food clerk that was essentially giving her recommendations. And of course, we see patients like this in practice every day. And then the last kind of mistake that I see, you're using cutting edge tools, whether that's NAD injections or peptides, from researchers, again, who haven't seen patients, who have access to very different tools, and it is their job to be healthy. And when basically I see people asking me about peptides when they don't have any of the other, they've never done a stool analysis, they don't know what's going on in their blood work, they don't know what electrolytes and hydration levels are at. They're just missing some really basic information, and we're trying to go for that shiny thing. So my hope is that with this episode, I can save you a bunch of time, energy, and money, and help direct you in the right place. So fertility is so time sensitive. If we go to just try this and see what happens, this is a sure way to run out of time. So we want to be very mindful of how we spend our time, energy, and money in the fertility space. It's not the same as someone who has an infinite amount of time, presumably if they're just working on optimizing their health. So here's my new lens for you guys, and I'm going to break it into 3. And this is something that I've been talking about for a long time, but I want to expand on it a little bit more. Here are the 3 filters that you want to use. There's right therapy, there's right person, and there's right time. The right therapy is, does this specific supplement have a clear job? What is the intention behind this supplement? How are you tracking if the supplement is working? Is it through testing? Is it through data? Is it through symptoms? Do we know if this specific supplement has a clear job? Is it matched to an actual problem in your labs or your symptoms? And is this the right time to introduce this particular supplement? I've talked about the sequence of treatments a lot, but what we do month 1 of treatment is very different than what we do month 3 and 5, than what we do in 6 to 12 months into treatment when you're trying to conceive versus when you're detoxing. So the right therapy component is we need to understand, do you actually need this? The right person, we're now getting into, what are your genetics doing? What's your methylation? What's your detox pathway? What's your terrain, your microbiome? Can you actually handle the dosages and the forms and the types of supplements that I'm going to give you? Right now, I'm building out a big practitioner on the back end for us all practitioners. I'm building out a big supplement database, and I'm including a lot of research and the notes, the clinical pearls. And one of the examples why I wanted to record this podcast is because I broke down all the different B vitamins. So as a practice, we do not recommend B complex anymore because it's not specific enough. We do so much testing, we can see exactly what the person needs. It's one of the reasons we don't recommend a prenatal, because a prenatal kind of starts to become noise when you know exactly the nutrients that the person is missing and the genetics that are involved. So we don't recommend complexes for the most part, very rarely. So the reason for that is if, for example, your genetics, and let's talk about the methylation genetics because that's the most common one that we test. Everyone is probably, or a lot of you are probably familiar with MTHFR. And everyone is talking about how I have this MTHFR mutation, and so I need more folate, and I need to make sure it's methylated. Well, that's not necessarily true, because it's not just about the MTHFR gene. That's one gene, but there's 13 that we know of now that are directly impacting methylation, and then, hundreds, if not thousands of more genes that are indirectly impacting methylation. So if we look at the MTHFR gene, right, but what about the COMT gene, the MAT, the MTR, the MTRR, the SHMT? There are more genes that are impacting methylation. And for someone who, let's say, has a COMT mutation, especially a homozygous, they're not going to do well with methylated vitamins. They're not going to do well with methylfolate or methylcobalamin, and they're likely going to get more anxious and agitated with that. So we now need to look at something like folinic acid and adenosyl or hydroxycobalamin. So just different forms of the B9 and the B12 that the body can absorb and use more. So when I say right person, what is happening in the test and in your body that tells me that this is the right form, the right dosage, and the right time to introduce this supplement. This is just one example. If we look at digestion, now I'm talking about your stomach, your pancreas, your liver, your gallbladder. It will also help us to dictate what is the form of supplement that you need, which dose, how often do you need to take the supplement in order to get the desired results that we're looking for, and what other supporting supplements that you need. For example, someone who has a really leaky gut and a lot of pathogens and infections, if I just start giving them really high doses of nutrients, they're likely not going to absorb them, and they're essentially not getting what they can through food because of the leaky gut situation. So we have to incorporate supplements that help to support the gut lining and then decrease inflammation, and something that's going to address the pathogen. For example, if you have a parasitic load and you have low iron and low ferritin, and I just give you low iron and low ferritin, I'm probably going to feed that infection and increase the inflammation. So there is a lot of different things that we want to be thinking about when we're taking supplements. So that's the right therapy, now the right person, and then we go to the right time. The timing is, where are you in your menstrual cycle? Where are you in your protocol? Where are you in your fertility journey? Are you in the phase where you're ready to start trying to conceive, or are you in the phase where you're trying to find out why you can't conceive? Are you preparing for IVF or IUI? The supplement protocols will dictate that. And in my practice, we do not keep the same supplements for forever. We can predict maybe for, our patients that we have been working with for a while, hey, here's what I would do for the next 3 months. After that, it becomes very difficult to predict because there's so many things that can happen and change in 3 months' time. So we change our protocols probably every 4 to 6 weeks. And sometimes we'll make tweaks a little bit sooner depending on how the person is feeling. Sometimes the tweaks don't have to happen because everything is going really well. But the timing and the sequence of the treatment is really important. And I've recorded a podcast recently on the sequence in terms of handling the pathogens. That's what I mean by the right time. I always draw a staircase for my patients. And this is, kind of the visual that helps them understand right therapy, right person, right time. And when they come to me and I look at all of the supplements that they're taking, I go, you're taking some really good stuff. It's just not the right time. The body can't really absorb it because you have all of this other stuff in the way. So we're going to put this aside for now. Let's deal with this. And then when we reintroduce the NAD therapy or the really high, the NAC, whatever it is, the peptides that you were taking that were not responding in a way that you were hoping you would respond, then when we introduce it at the right time, after we've done some of the foundational work, that's when we tend to see the magic happen. So think of supplements are like a power tool. In the right hands, on the right job, they're incredible. In the wrong hands, at the wrong time, it can make a big mess faster. And this is an example I want to use with the patients. I've seen a couple of women with endometriosis who are also close to the perimenopausal stage, who essentially just overdid on some of these supplements who are known to support estrogen clearance, like calcium D-glucarate, like the sulforaphanes, so the Brock shot, and the DIM. Because women with endo are known to have estrogen dominance, that doesn't mean essentially these women assumed that they have estrogen dominance and they were just taking these supplements long-term at fairly high doses to help clear the estrogen. And by the time we saw them, they essentially pushed themselves into early menopause, perimenopause, like the hair is starting to fall out, the skin is starting to look really dry, they have vaginal dryness, they have no libido, they have very weak ovulation. So the problem is, it depends on the endometriosis, your ability, where is it? Is it high estrogen or is it stagnant estrogen? That it's just all sitting in the reproductive system and then it's not moving around the body. So do we actually need to get rid of estrogen or do we just need to move estrogen in the body? When we are just assuming I have this and you didn't do any testing or you did some testing but never retested to confirm that it's enough, we can create a big mess. This is one of the big messes. So when people ask, what supplement do you recommend for endometriosis or for this? I'm very cautious because I know the power that these supplements have when they're done right and the mess that they can create when they're done poorly. So here's my kind of 3 basic ideas for you guys when you're trying to choose and figure out what supplement you need to take. The first thing is I need you to do the basics before the bottles. Whatever you're seeing on the internet, like this supplement is showing this real food with stabilized blood sugar, with enough protein, with really good fiber, with hydration and minerals, with a good sleep and some kind of stress and nervous system work, there's no bottle for that. That's just you creating an environment where the body can thrive. And I often like to compare the body to a plant. If I put a plant in the corner with no sunlight, I don't water it, it's going to die. If I make sure I put some good fertilizer on it, I put it in sunlight, I water it, I talk to it nicely daily, and I look at it and I admire it, it's going to thrive. You are a plant. I want you to objectively look at your environment and go, am I a plant that's stuck in the corner and not able to thrive because nobody's watering me, or I'm not watering myself, there's not enough fertilizer, I never see the sun? There is no bottle for that, okay? We need to actually change our environment. Obviously, cleaning up the environmental toxins is a big one as well, and I just feel like that's something that we should all be aware of and working on, because the cleaner your environment, the better you will feel. It amazes me how many people are still not aware of this, and they're throwing the sunscreens and the cosmetic products and the perfumes and all of these things that just have endocrine disrupting chemicals, which essentially means you will need more of the other stuff to help balance that out. So most supplements are trying to fill the gaps that are created by these basics that are not in place. So if the foundation is cracked, you'll keep needing more and more products to compensate, and essentially you will just plateau. I'll talk to you about how I like to use supplements, because sometimes supplements can help us create a better environment, because let's say you're really overwhelmed, or your energy is low, or you're just craving foods that are not good for you because your microbiome is a mess, then we can use supplements to help us, but that intention has to be there. So that's the first point, is you need to have the basics first before you even consider doing supplements. The second point is that you should be testing before you're taking any supplements. That is a standard that I'd love to set for everybody. I think supplements are poorly regulated. I think there's a lot of conventional docs that are after supplements and they'll say they're poorly regulated. There's no research behind them. They don't really help. And so then it gives supplements a bad rep. And I agree, when I go into a Costco or a general store and I look at the supplements there, those supplements don't work. They don't work because they're very poor quality. You don't know how they were made, how they're formulated, what's the actual, is it active form, is it not? It's a mess. When I test and I see the genetics and I see the nutrient levels and I see the environmental toxic load and the gut function and the vaginal microbiome, and I see all of these things in place, and then I curate a protocol that's specific for you with the highest quality supplements, they absolutely work. But that's not something that's happening. We're not seeing more of that. We're seeing more of the other thing, and my hope is that we can change that. So we need to test before we actually, and I'd much rather see you invest your money into testing and into working it with a practitioner than thousands of dollars a month, with definitely over the years, on supplements. Because understanding, do you need B12? Is it low? Is it ferritin? Is it low or high? I can't tell you how many people were low energy taking iron, and they actually have really high iron, and they were causing more inflammation and more issues. The same with vitamin D. If your vitamin D is at like 18 and optimal is at 75, you don't need 2,000 IUs, you need like 10,000 IUs a day. So it will dictate a lot for you. The biggest reason that the testing matters, and I want to just give an example, is we want to supplement for root cause, not for symptoms. For example, when someone has difficulty sleeping, and you cannot just tell them to go to bed earlier, because they can't. Their nervous system is dysregulated, so they cannot fall asleep earlier. But if I go ahead and just say, well, you should try melatonin, you should take GABA, you should take theanine, you should take whatever to help you sleep, I still don't know the root cause of why that system isn't sleeping. So when someone is not sleeping well, it essentially tells me that their nervous system doesn't feel safe to unwind and to relax. It's stuck. There's some beautiful supplements that can help us unwind the nervous system, but I need to understand the root cause. So this is where the testing comes into place. For some of my patients who've had difficulty sleeping or waking up frequently, it's because they were in pain. And so they have joint issues and they have excess weight that they had to lose, or they had rheumatoid arthritis, which means there's an autoimmune component, which means there's antimicrobial imbalance, which usually means there is a nutrient deficiency like vitamin D, like vitamin C and selenium and zinc and all of these things that the immune system needs. So before I can get them sleeping well, I have to bring the inflammation down. I have to get the microbiome balanced. I had someone who had terrible sleep because they had heavy metals. And so if I gave them melatonin and GABA and theanine, it doesn't touch it because I'm not addressing the root cause. And so then this person is coming to me and saying supplements don't work. But it's not that that supplement doesn't work. It wasn't the right therapy or the right time or the right person. So the testing allows us to really formulate that. And I just recently had this, another patient who has really terrible sleep, like 4 hours of sleep with poor DNA fragmentation, I think because of this poor sleep. Then we're in the middle of testing to see, and I'm always really curious to find out what it is for this particular patient before I give them any recommendation. And the last point is, so the first one is basics before the supplements. Then we want to test before we supplement. And the last point is that not all supplements are created equal. And if we really want to standardize supplementation and treat it as a powerful tool that it is, we need to stop buying things off the shelf that we essentially have no idea if they're working or not, or which pathways they're working on, and what are the short-term and long-term consequences and side effects, because there's definitely some side effects to supplements depending on what you're using and how long you're using for, the dosages, where you're getting it from, et cetera, et cetera. And what I have learned over the last couple of years, especially more so, that all supplements are really not created equal. And even if it's a reputable brand, even if it's a really well-researched supplement, not all of them will work the same. And so the example of this is NAC, N-acetylcysteine. That's a really powerful antioxidant. It feeds into glutathione. Everybody should take it. It's safe during pregnancy. Well, I have like one company that I trust and that I like, and that NAC is very different when I recommend it from any other brand. And it's like from Australia. I know it sounds crazy, but I have tried all of these supplements and I'm like, I don't know if I can say when I take this, I feel significantly different. And if I don't feel it, then there's no way my patients are going to feel it, because, I've been working with my body for a long time and I've done so much testing and research on myself, and I have such high awareness of my system that if I don't feel it or don't notice it, any beneficial effects anyways, my patients won't either. And therefore, I do not want to spend their money or their energy on taking the supplement, because when you're taking a supplement, you're thinking, this is something that's good for me. This is something that's helping my fertility. And then if it's not actually doing that job, you're going to start to lose trust. Okay, that's really important. And whether that's you lose trust in your practitioner, or you lose trust in supplements, or you lose trust in your body, that's really important. So as I said, I'm building out this database for our back end on practitioners. And as I'm going through all the different brands and why we pick them, there's very few brands that we trust. And there's different supplements that we use from those brands. And we have been reading the fine print for a long time. I will give you an example. I just built out this one this morning, and it was on curcumin, and I knew it was going to take me a little bit of time because there's just so much research and supplements in different types and forms, like liposomal, versus the formulated in a phospholipid complex. And basically, most curcumins are formulated depending on which brand and which company, but there's a lot that are formulated with soy lecithin. So soy, for some people who are estrogen dominant, may not be a good idea. For a male who has issues with estrogen breakdown, that might not be a good idea. So reading that fine print around the curcumin and inflammation, is important. And I think most people are not doing that, including practitioners, right? We kind of say, oh, that's a reputable brand, let's just take it. And that's a big no-no for us as a company. We want to make sure that we have taken all the supplements and we know what they're doing and what they're working in our body before we recommend them. When you're now looking at a supplement, I want you to be very hypercritical about it. Is the person that's making this supplement, are they actually healthy? Do I consider them healthy? Do they look healthy to me? What is the person's mission and vision? Are they working with patients? Who is this person like as a person? Are they a good person? What are their values, et cetera, et cetera? That energy is really important, because if the person who is making the supplement is about cutting corners, then they're going to cut corners in different places. So this is kind of the filter that I have now when I'm thinking about supplements. When I'm trying things, I'll always get a bottle for myself if I hear that there's a new product out there, and I'll see and I'll track some data. So that's the last point, that not all supplements are created equal. Like, how do you know that it works? So we test a lot. I test myself. We obviously test our patients, but we also look at data. So a good supplement routine will have meaningful changes in your data, in your labs, in your cholesterol, in your blood sugar levels, your sleep, your stress. I had this one couple, and the guy had really high LDL cholesterol, and they switched to carnivore, and he said, I don't really care that my cholesterol is high because, I know that everything else is good. And I'm like, what do you mean everything else is good? How do you know that? He was like, well, I feel fine, but then I have some bloating and I do have this excess weight. So it's like, right, but high LDL for anybody is a sign of inflammation. And usually we need cholesterol to make hormones, but in order to make cholesterol into a hormone like testosterone or estrogen or progesterone for women, you need good liver function and you need good mitochondrial function, because that is the process of making cholesterol into a hormone. And you need, lots of different enzymes and minerals and vitamins to do that process. So a high LDL tells me that the cholesterol is being built up, and it's likely there is issue either with the liver or the mitochondria or both. And looking at other tests, we can see that. So now this person, we're about a year in working together. They're actually, they're pregnant, but we're still working together, and his cholesterol is the lowest it has been. And he also, in a good way, it's not too low, but he also feels better. So now the guy that I met a year ago who, gave me a little bit of a hard time because, he just thought, well, it's fine if cholesterol is too high. It depends what kind of cholesterol. It depends what else is going on. But if your liver enzymes are elevated and your cholesterol is high and your blood sugar is a little bit dysregulated, I don't care what diet you said you learned on the internet that's supposed to be good for you. It's not good for you. So we need to change it. So I'm very data driven. We need to see whatever you're doing, is it actually working? Because if it's not working, you are doing something that's not working. You're not getting closer to your health goals, and definitely not to your, your fertility goals. The last thing that I will say about, how do you know if the supplements work, is sometimes I will use the supplements to help us correct our environment. So we track a lot of data. I love the Aura Ring. That's probably one of my favorites. We'll look at the continuous glucose monitor. I'll track, menstrual cycle using a needle. But if sometimes, patients are coming to us and they're really tired, they're really anxious, they can't sleep, they are craving foods that are not good for them, their blood sugar is all over the place. When we look at the testing, we can absolutely supplement some things to help the symptoms instead of just supplementing for root cause. So that example that I used with someone who is not sleeping well, based on his testing, I'll be able to see which sleeping supplement he'll likely respond to the best, so we can see if we can start to get him to sleep better while we're working on the root cause. So whether that's heavy metals or a parasitic infection in the gut or, mineral deficiency, some other viral overload, whatever it is, we're going to start to address that. And as we're addressing it, we'll support the nervous system at the same time and the sleep. So I will absolutely use supplements to help us with some of the symptoms, so then we can correct our environment. But that intention has to be behind that. So if you're just supplementing only for symptoms, that's how you end up with 10, 20, 30 different bottles, not knowing what's causing what. If you just have one or two supplements that are for the symptoms and then the rest are there to optimize and look at the root cause and optimize the root cause, then you're going to see much better results. So supplements can be a powerful tool, part of your fertility plan. I love supplements. We use them a lot, but it has to be built on a solid foundation. It has to be chosen based on your body and your labs, not someone else's protocols. So make sure your basics are in place first. That's the nutrition, the sleep, the stress, the environment. Supplements cannot outwork a life that's constantly pulling you in the other direction. The second thing is make sure you're testing before, like honestly, every time you have the urge to buy a supplement, just put that money in another account. And then once you have a couple $1,000s in there, that's when you know you're ready to invest into some testing. And my recommendation, I mean, by the time people come to us, they've been struggling for so long, we need to test a lot. If you're still new in the journey, you can test just one or two things at a time and kind of check in and how things are doing. But the longer you are struggling for, the deeper the testing we need to do. And then the third thing is right therapy, right person, right time. Whether that's your genetics, whether that's where you are in your menstrual cycle, where you are in your fertility journey, what your budget is, what your terrain is, your environment, all of those things will dictate your protocol. And this is something that I'll tell my practitioners all the time. There's like what we want to do, and there's what the patient can do. And it's not a right or a wrong. We need to meet our patients where they're at so we can actually provide them with good results. Because something we did mindfulness training with our team. My counselor is actually that I met long ago is I reconnected with him, and he's doing some mindfulness training for the whole team. And our mantra for the team right now is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think it's when we get into the phase of starting to grasp at straws, we actually start to make mistakes. We're on this hamster wheel. You have no idea what's doing what, and you're not moving any faster. So we want to slow things down. We want to be really intentional, because slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I am done with taking supplements, I don't know, please feel free to fill out an application. My team will review it. We'll get back to you if we can help. We'll show you what that looks like. If we can't, we'll make sure to point you guys in the right direction. Otherwise, I hope that this episode helps you look at supplements in a different way, treat them in a different way, and kind of put your money towards the right things, which is the basics, cleaning up the environment, optimizing your stress and your sleep, investing some money into testing before you essentially decide and work with a practitioner and start spending money on supplements. Because like I said, supplements are really powerful, but they cannot out-supplement your diet and your lifestyle. So that needs to be in place as well. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.